Mirasee.
I find that most people have a really negative history with goal setting. Like they've set a bazillion goals and they've never achieved any of them. So they've got this sort of deep connection to goal setting and failure. So it feels icky right out of the gate. And so I say, well, let's pick a goal that you bet money on achieving it.
Hi, I'm Dr. Irena O'Brien, and you're listening to Neuroscience of Coaching. I'm a cognitive neuroscientist with almost 30 years of study and practice in psychology and neuroscience. And as the founder of the Neuroscience School, I teach coaches and other wellness professionals real-world, evidence-based strategies to use in their own practices. In each episode, I invite a seasoned coach to discuss a topic that affects our field, and together, we provide you with science-backed tools to help your clients reach their goals by working with their brains to create results that last. For today's episode, we're going to dive into the perfect topic for January, setting and achieving goals. Unfortunately, most people have a negative association with goals because we've all experienced the peak of optimism in setting a goal and the pain of disappointment in not reaching it. So really, the first rule in goal setting is to accept that you won't achieve all that you set, and that's okay. But today, we will discuss how to reach more of them through better goal setting in the first place and creating better conditions for success. The main neurological principle to keep in mind is that your brain relentlessly pursues efficiency. It's hard to believe this when you think of how we humans can be so inefficient. But that's different than cognitive efficiency. The brain is basically calculating at every moment how to conserve and minimize its energy output, which is referred to as cognitive load. And we need to use this to our advantage when setting and working on our goals. Take willpower, for example. We tend to think of top goal achievers as having strong willpower, but research has shown this isn't really true. What these people do instead is create conditions and habits that don't test their willpower. They likely have roughly the same reservoir of willpower as the rest of us, but they avoid tapping into it because willpower is a huge cognitive load. So an example of creating conditions to avoid willpower is not having tempting treats in your home when you're on a diet, instead of trying to avoid eating them when they're already within easy access. Creating a habit to avoid willpower could include putting your phone in a drawer for the first hour of each day for a month if it tends to distract you at the start of your day. Both of these strategies are called pre-commitment, which is one of many approaches we'll discuss today. Others include breaking down goals, redefining success, and forgiving yourself. All of this comes back to a key theme of this show, which is working with our brains instead of against them. Our minds are endlessly amazing, which is why I do the work I do. And when we better understand how they work, we can achieve far more than we realize. So with that said, I'm excited to bring my guest on today, someone who has deep experience and expertise in this topic. Laura Posey is an internationally recognized speaker, author, and consultant. She's known as the Simple Planning Specialist for her unique ability to simply and easily laser focus her clients to get dramatic results. Her Simple Success Roadmap is used by more than 3,000 companies, from startups to those in the Fortune 100. She's the author of How to Plan Your Entire Year on One Sheet of Paper and co-author of Mastering the Art of Success, which she wrote with mega-selling author Jack Canfield, who is most famous for the Chicken Soup for the Soul book series. So Laura, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Irena. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, so am I. So could you expand a bit on my introduction of you and tell us how you ended up as an expert in planning and goal setting?
I got introduced to planning because I desperately needed it. I had started a business with a business partner, and about 5-6 years into the venture, I was just absolutely miserable. I hated the work we were doing, and nothing was working, and I couldn't figure out why. And I was hiking in Sedona, and I had a bit of a near-death experience. And I realized it was one of these moments where your brain sort of just brings this instant clarity. And I realized the whole reason I almost died on the hike in Sedona was the same reason that my business was almost killing me. And it's because I didn't have a plan for either. I had set out on the hike just like, well, I'm in shape. I can do this. And I'd started my business the same way. I thought, well, I'm really good at selling. I'm doing sales training. Like, this should be a no-brainer. And I realized I didn't have a plan for how I was going to build my business, what I needed to do, and all of the pieces of the business that needed to be working properly. So I did my first plan that evening and just fell in love with it. And I fell in love with the process of planning. I took the plan that I used to really turn things around, and I used it with another client, and he got extraordinary results. And I thought, wow, this is exciting. I'm getting such better results for my clients doing planning than I ever was doing sales training. And so the fire was lit, and I've just never looked back.
Okay. So could you share your plan or the highlights of your plan?
Yeah. Like, what's in my plan? Yeah. So I always start with 3-year goals and 1-year goals. And the 3-year goals are really wrapped around your ideal lifestyle. So we always start with lifestyle planning. We look at health, wealth, friends and family, hobbies and fun, and community and giving back. And then a lot of our clients also add in a spiritual piece to that as well. And that really gives the why for the goals. I figure out the goals using what we call a lifestyle calculator that just helps me understand how much money do I need to do all the things that I want to do in my lifestyle plan, and how much free time do I need to do those things as well. And that informs my 3-year goals and my 1-year goals. I always put a couple of bucket list items on my plan. I see so many people get really deep into their life and they have regrets about the things that they didn't do. And they're usually those big bucket list things. And so I'm just committed to getting bucket list items done every year and not waiting until I'm retired or whatever. I have my core values so that I'm constantly reminded of the basic principles that help me make decisions. I have 3 weekly rituals that I do. One is having a money date with myself so that I go through all of my accounts and I stay on top of my money. I look at it, make sure it's working the way I want it to work for me. I have a connections time that I dedicate just to reaching out, staying in touch with people. And then I have a weekly planning ritual where I look at the week ahead. The rest of the plan is taken up with listing out the key projects that I want to get done this year, the changes that I want to make to my business, and when I'm going to make those changes. And then there's a section on the plan for tracking so that I can make sure that each month I'm looking at, hey, am I on track or off track to achieve my goals? And I have a little moment where if I'm on track, I go, great, what did I do to stay on track? And how can I repeat that? And if I'm off track, I can look at that and go, okay, why am I off track? And how do I, A, catch up to plan, and B, stay on plan for the coming month?
Wow, sounds like a really comprehensive plan.
I've been working on it for about 15 years and tweaking, and I think I've got it right, but who knows?
So do you find that everybody jumps right in and just loves starting the planning, or do you find that there are people who resist?
Oh, there are definitely people who resist. And a lot of the resistance comes from one of 2 things generally. One is I've tried planning and it didn't work, so something's wrong with me. Like, I can't plan, it doesn't work for me. And then I also get some folks on the more creative side of things who say a plan feels like a straitjacket to me. I need more flexibility in doing things. I want to just show up and wing it.
Yeah. So do you have a plan for them?
The plan that we use has a lot of flexibility built into it. So the folks that say, I can't plan, I say, well, try it this way and see. I don't know that I believe that you can't plan. I think maybe we just haven't found the right way of planning for you. Let's see if this is it. And for the folks that say, hey, I like to wing it, I often ask them, are there times in your life where you have found that some structure actually supports what you want to do? If you're an artist, do you have a dedicated time to practice your art? Do you have a regular plan for practicing your art? And they usually say, yeah, actually I do. And I say, well, then you're certainly capable of it. Maybe the plans that you've used, again, are too restrictive. Let's look at a plan that has some more flexibility in it and see if it works for you.
Okay, so creating a plan is one thing, right? But executing a plan is something else.
Oh, gosh, yes. That's the hard part, right?
So, yeah, and one of the biggest challenges really is willpower, right? And so, as I mentioned, we avoid taxing our willpower by creating conditions and habits. And what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we talk about a lot in our programs is the concept of win the day. And, we're working towards these big long-term goals. Ultimately, what we're working towards is to build a business that serves our needs. I like to say the business exists to serve you, the owner. It thrives because you serve others. But you did this for yourself, right? You did it because, you took this entrepreneurial journey because you wanted to do things your way. You wanted things on your own terms. You didn't want to have a boss. And so let's build a business that serves you. And so that's what we're ultimately working towards. But when push comes to shove, really all we're decent at usually is managing our day. And sometimes we have to break it down even smaller than that. So we use what we call a daily success checklist, which is a worksheet that we use that has 3 columns. The first one is a preparation column. The middle one is the get it done column. And the third column is the reflection column. And that tool helps you just win the day. Can I just get done the things I need to do today? And can I learn to put a reasonable amount of things on the list so that I'm not overwhelming myself constantly and getting in the habit of having a list that never gets done, but rather getting in the habit of having a list that gets done so you can, as soon as the list is done, you can quit and go, do all the other things that light you up in the world. And so I think that concept of win the day and just focusing on what can I control today really helps stack the deck to achieve those long-term goals, because if we just win each day, we'll get where we want to go ultimately.
Well, that's true, right? Because our progress is built in small steps. And so one of my favorite strategies is to break things down into small steps, just like you do, but to start the day with a step that is achievable so that you have success on your first task of the day, right? Because that you get a dopamine release when you have that success, and that dopamine predicts your success on the next task. So in effect, you could do this dopamine stacking all day long. And the amazing thing is that when you start your day that way, because you had that success first thing in the morning, it leads to an amazing day. Yeah,
It really does, doesn't it? I mean, it feels effortless.
it does. It feels effortless. Yeah.
I never learned the neuroscience behind it, but there was an admiral or a general or something, and he gave a very famous talk that went all over YouTube and stuff. And he said, one of his habits for success was to make his bed every day, right? Like, make your bed. And I just thought, wow, it's just a simple little thing that anybody can do. And it just starts the day off with this little win. And we call them success habits. They're in the preparation column of the daily success checklist, right? But there's just little things that make you feel better so that when you go into your workday, you're kind of already charged up and raring to go.
Yeah, that really doesn't work for me. Making my bed and having good breakfast doesn't mean that I'm going to jump into the work.
Yeah. So what works for you?
So my first work task of the day, I make sure that's small and I succeed at that work task. And then that sets me up for a productive day. So really, the moral of the story is that you have to know yourself and what works for you, right? And what works to motivate you, right? Because just sitting there, that's the other thing, just sitting there and thinking, geez, I got to get motivated. I got to get motivated. You know that doesn't work, right? You just have to jump in and start.
Yeah. I've heard the people use the phrase, like, what's the smallest thing you could do to move towards the ultimate action that you want to take? Like, if you want to go to the gym, the smallest thing you could do is put your shoes on or put your gym clothes on. And that starts the process. When I wanted to build the habit of going to the gym, I would tell myself, look, all you got to do is get to the parking lot. Just get in the car, go to the parking lot. And if I get to the parking lot and go, I just really don't want to do this, then I could turn around and go home. But I had to just at least get to the parking lot, because for me, the hard part was getting out the door.
So how many times did you go in?
Oh, 99% of the time I go in.
So you didn't go back home once you got to the car?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, once I'm in the gym parking lot, I'm going in, right? I could count on one hand the number of times that I've gotten to the gym parking lot not gone in.
Yeah. So the thing is that you have to know what works for you, right? Because everyone is different. And so you figured out that strategy. I go to a gym where I do classes and they're in my agenda. And most of the time, I don't think about whether I want to go or not go. I just go, right? The odd time, I think, I really don't feel like it today. So I'll cancel. But that's rare. It's not as hard as people think it is.
Yeah, I hear folks a lot of times, they're trying to solve the whole thing, right? Like they're trying to figure out, how do I achieve this annual goal? And it's like, well, you do it one day at a time.
Or one task at a time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The day is just made up of little tasks. I always try to tell people, I want you to write the task in such a way that when you look at it, you know exactly what to do to get started. So instead of saying research this topic, just change the word research to Google. Because when you see that, your brain goes, well, I know how to Google, right? Like I could totally put that in the search box. And that's what research is. But research sounds painful and hard and difficult and sucky. I mean, unless you're a researcher, you probably are like, oh, research, yay.
Yeah, I love doing the research part. And my first task of the day is never research because I could just spend all day doing that. And really, it's fun and I love learning, but I'm not getting anything moving forward, really, or I'm not producing anything. So my first task of the day is something else, something where I have to produce something. So like writing. And I'll start with something, an easy part of it. Choose some easy section, do that. And then that just sets you up. But let's move on now to procrastination. I'm sure that a big obstacle for many people is either procrastinating in setting their goals or procrastinating during the steps toward their goals. So what strategies and techniques do you use with your clients to address procrastination?
I find that most people have a really negative history with goal setting. Like they've set a bazillion goals and they've never achieved any of them. So they've got this sort of deep connection to goal setting and failure. So it feels icky right out of the gate. And so I say, well, let's pick a goal that you'd bet money on achieving it. Like, let's pick something where you know you can win. And how about that as a goal? And invariably, when we do that, they go, well, I don't know, that doesn't seem very challenging. You say, well, okay, well, where could we set that goal where it feels a little challenging to you, but you still feel really confident that you can achieve it? And we look for that sweet spot where there's a little bit of a stretch, but still a deep sense of confidence and comfort. And it takes that fear of failure off the table. And so they're more excited by the goal than they are afraid of the goal.
Well, one of the things that research shows is that when people set goals, they're driven by the potential reward, right? So the excitement of it. But when it comes to working on their goals, they're driven by the effort required. So one of the things is to really watch the amount of effort that's required to achieve your goals. And it doesn't mean that you have to create smaller goals. You just might have to break them down into smaller steps. And so I think there's a mistaken belief too that if you have small steps, then you have small goals, but that's not true.
No, it was interesting. You were talking about sort of inputs and outputs, and there's the inputs in your business where you're doing the research and you're doing the work. And then there's the output where you actually produce things that go out into the world that the people can use and consume. And we always look to have a balance of those in the tasks that people are doing and sort of look at, do they prefer inputs or outputs? Like which ones light them up more? And have those kind of as the reward for doing the other ones.
That's a good one. Yeah.
And also I think that, one of the things that I try to get folks to do is to look at the task ahead of them and say, if I asked you really quickly, like how long that task is going to take to get done, if that number that you come up with is more than about 30 minutes, see if you can break the task into something smaller, right? So like the write an article then becomes write 3 paragraphs. And that just seems really doable because I see this tendency in us as humans to, like, we've got this long list of things to do and we scan it for the easy ones. Like, what are the short things? Let me just knock that off. And then we never get to the big ones, which are generally the important ones. because they just seem too much. And we've used up all of our energy on the little ones. We don't have the energy left to tackle the big ones at the end of the day. And so if we could just make them all little tasks, then we can just start at the top and work to the bottom.
Yeah, that's another thing that is useful to touch on is to monitor our energy levels. When do we have the most energy? Right? So I'm a morning person. I wake up around 5:30 in the morning. Yeah. And so if I don't get this hard cognitive work done by noon, that hard cognitive work is not going to get done that day.
I so feel you on that. I've got to finish writing some stuff, and I have a choice of writing it this afternoon or Monday morning. And I already am like, oh yeah, it's going to happen Monday morning. Like I could promise myself all day long it's going to happen this afternoon, and I might get it done, but it's not going to be as good.
And it's going to be painful.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas Monday morning, it might even be enjoyable.
Oh yeah, I'll be excited about it Monday morning.
Yeah. When I finish like 2 or 3 in the afternoon and I just can't continue, and yet if I have to get something out the following day, the following morning, I've even gotten up at 3 and 4 a.m. to start again. And I'm refreshed and it's even enjoyable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to point out to our listeners, I mean, Laura and I are talking about doing our hard cognitive work in the morning, but if you're not a morning person, you might have to do your hard cognitive work at the later in the day. So it really is being aware of your own circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
So there was one more thing that I wanted to touch on. A big challenge that I see among students and clients in general is the approach of working on goals when they feel like it. And the problem is if you only act when you feel like it, you'll never get what you want. And we like to believe that humans are thinking beings that feel, when in fact we're feeling beings that think. So what can our listeners do to get around this and take more action even when they don't feel like it?
Yeah, we call that productivity roller coaster riding. It's like the only time you get super motivated to work is when you look at your bank balance and go, oh crap, I don't have any money. And then suddenly you're really motivated to get things done. I think this, again, goes back to a couple of the things that we talked about before, where having that daily success checklist, like, look, these are the things that I'm going to do. And we look at it as, there's the preparation stuff, which is really just reviewing your goals, reviewing the big projects you're working on, getting those success habits done, and then choosing up to 3 things that are a work on the business. So you're working on small tasks on those projects to move things forward. And then the rest of the tasks on your list are if you've got calls or appointments or things that you've got to do. And then you have the option to put other things on there. So on a day when you're feeling it, you might have a longer list of things. And a day where you're just really not feeling it, you might have a shorter list. So for me, I take Monday mornings and Friday afternoons off. So my Monday and Friday lists are really short, but my Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday tend to be much longer. And by having those project tasks, those working on the business, those change tasks first and getting them done right out of the gate. And again, they're small, like they're under 30 minutes or things you can really get done. I think that kind of kicks in that motivation. Like, oh, I already got this big stuff done, and you're kind of in a groove. So if you weren't feeling it, you can be feeling it. And I think it's a place where if you're really not feeling it, sometimes you just have to leverage, you just have to flex that willpower muscle enough to get started.
It's also about brain networks, which brain network you're in. So the default mode network is active when we're in our own thoughts and other times, but let's just say it's when we're in our own thoughts. Central executive network is active when we're doing external work. The thing is, they both can't be active at the same time. It's one or the other, so that if you are sitting there and trying to get to work up the motivation, you're keeping yourself in the default mode network. And you're never going to get external work done in the default mode network. So you have to get yourself into the central executive network. And how you do that is you got to take your thoughts out of your mind and bring them out into the room. So look at the items in your room. For example, look out the window and see, and look at the trees and the birds and all of this without judgment. Or my favorite one is just start working on something small and simple. And it'll get you out of the default mode network and into the central executive network.
I love that. It's a law of physics, right? An object in motion tends to stay in motion. An object at rest tends to stay at rest. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, exactly. When people know about the brain networks and how they work, it's really powerful. I talk about the brain networks quite a bit in other episodes. And the other thing I wanted to touch on too was, like you said, there are days when you just don't feel like it. And I have those days too where I just don't feel like working, but not working is not an option. So I choose something that's not hard. I used to be an accountant and I love accounting. So I'll just work on my accounting that day. It still keeps me moving forward in my business, right? And then I'll get back to the hard stuff the next day.
Yeah. I think that's really key there, that self-awareness of what is easy work for you and what is hard work, and sort of looking at both of them without judgment and going, they're both work, they're both necessary things. There's the stuff that has to be done, the stuff that makes money, the stuff you like to do. And, the sweet spot is the stuff that, if I could do stuff that needs to be done that makes me money and I like it, yay.
Exactly. Yeah.
But all the rest of that stuff has to be done. And some of us would take the stuff that needs to be done that we don't like, that doesn't necessarily make us money, and we outsource that. We give it to an assistant. We hire somebody to take that stuff off our plate.
In my mastermind, they keep telling me that I should give that accounting stuff to someone else. But I like doing it. So if I didn't have that, everything would be hard.
Yeah. I'm like you. I like data and I like numbers. And I can't say that I love accounting, but I do find there is some satisfaction in just like reconciling an account. And it's like, oh, it balances.
So let me go back. So we can only do 4 to 6 hours of hard cognitive work in a day, and our brains are tired after that. And so anything beyond that are the easier tasks. And so that's where we have to be strategic about when are we doing those easier tasks, right? We should leave them for times when we are tired, when we are more tired and we don't have the energy to do the hard cognitive work. Okay, so I'm curious, do you have a standout client success story related to setting and achieving goals? Maybe someone who was really bad off and fully turned it around.
I have a fabulous story. Yeah. He was actually the first person I did planning with. When I met him, he was just in a world of hurt. He was running a $600,000 business, but he was 3 years behind on his taxes. He was maxed out on his credit cards. He was just grasping at anything to try to keep his head above water. And we sat down, we put his plan together, and he just took it and ran with it. And he just created a rule. He said, if it's on my plan, I do it. If it's not on my plan, I don't. And he hyper-focused himself. He took all this ball of energy that he had been scattering everywhere, and he really focused it. And at the end of that first year, he had paid off all his debt, paid off all his back taxes. He'd grown to $1 million. And in 3 years, he took that $1 million business to $4 million, zero debt. And he'd put enough team in place that he was able to turn the business over to let his employees run the business. And he spent most of his time doing what he really wanted to do, which was be a volunteer firefighter. And he's just kicking butt still. He's just having the time of his life.
Wow. Wow, what a story. So for any listeners who are already feeling their New Year's resolutions slipping away, what's one tip you can share to help them get back on track?
Truly keep it simple. Write your tasks as simply as you can so that when you look at it, you go, oh, yeah, I could do that. Just taking the time to write tasks in a way that's clear and simple and actionable changes everything. And the easiest way to do that is just remember to always start every task with a verb.
Thank you for that, Laura. That's a great piece of advice to wrap up our talk today. So what's the best way for listeners to learn more about you and what you do?
Probably the easiest way is to hop over to my website, simplesuccessplans.com. And we've got some assessments that you can take to learn more about yourself. We have some free downloads. You can download the Daily Success Checklist. I've got a blog with some fun articles on it. You're welcome to just troll around. So we have lots of free resources to get folks started.
Okay, Laura, I'm so grateful for your time with me today. This has been a wealth of great information.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, so did I. So thank you everyone for listening. To accomplish all you want in life can be very difficult to impossible to do without setting and executing goals. Sure, you can do the small stuff without much of a plan, but the big things that bring us fulfillment and deep satisfaction, they require goals that we work diligently toward. In this pursuit, I want to first emphasize the importance of self-forgiveness. If you reach for big enough goals, you will fall short. We all do. And if this isn't happening, then your goals aren't really big enough for personal growth. You're operating from fear. And at least some of that fear comes from self-criticism. So the next time you set and fall short of a goal, remember not to beat yourself up. Failure is just a lesson that's been given a bad rap. Instead, think of a smaller step toward that goal that you can achieve and try again. Usually, goals we don't reach are ones we don't break down enough into manageable steps. And beyond that, keep in mind what Laura and I talked about today regarding willpower, procrastination, and not waiting until you feel like doing something. So we covered so much today, and there's more than we had time for. So please go to the show notes, and I'll share some great resources to help you in your efforts to set and achieve the goals you desire for a happier and more rewarding life. I'm Dr. Irena O'Brien, and you've been listening to Neuroscience of Coaching. You can find out more about me at neuroscienceschool.com. Neuroscience of Coaching is a part of the Mirasee FM podcast network, which also includes such shows as Just Between Coaches and To Lead is Human. This episode was produced by Andrew Chapman. Danny Inney is our executive producer, and Marvin Del Rosario is our audio editor. To make sure you don't miss great episodes coming up on Neuroscience of Coaching, please follow us on Mirasee FM's YouTube channel or your favorite podcast player. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a comment or a starred review. It's the best way to help us get these ideas out there to more people. Thanks, and we hope you'll join us next time.